A man died 2,000 years ago in the lowest, most shameful form of death, crucifixion. And then a bunch of guys now called Christians want you to believe that he is God. You see, I'm really fascinated by apologetics, right? And how they can explain all the historical evidence and all the manuscripts. Jesus has the most manuscripts to show that he was alive, he died, and he rose again. But there's just one question that all of that doesn't answer. How does him dying on the cross make sense? How does that make sense at all? How does a shameful death, naked on the cross, how does that make sense? Oh, and the more I think about it, the more I know that it's not supposed to make sense. Maybe it's not supposed to make sense. You see, the Apostle Paul called it the foolishness of the cross. He said to the Jews it was a stumbling block, and then to the Greek it was foolishness. Because the Jews, they sought for signs, and then the Greek, they sought for wisdom. But God was pleased by the foolishness of what was preached to save men. So the gospel message is not supposed to appeal to your intellect. It is not supposed to make sense. It is the foolishness of what is preached that saved men. You see, I cannot explain to you as an apologetic word. I cannot explain to you in a way that would appeal to your intellect why his dying on the cross means, and his resurrection means, that he is Messiah. But I can tell you how believing that and accepting him into my life transformed my life personally, changed who I am. And I've seen him change so many lives around me by believing the foolishness of the cross. The Apostle Paul put it this way, that God was pleased by the foolishness of what was preached to save men, because men in their wisdom could not save themselves. Maybe it's not supposed to make sense. And I've had these arguments with people of other religions and atheists. And no matter what you say, there's something else to be said, But the gospel wasn't meant to appeal to your intellect. The foolishness of what was preached, the death and the resurrection of Christ, that is where the power is. And maybe if we stick to preaching the gospel in its entirety, in its purity, that Christ walked the earth, that he died and he resurrected, maybe if we stick to preaching that, we would let the gospel do its work. You see, the power is in the message. Whenever you have an opportunity to witness to someone about Jesus, you are not under any pressure to make anyone believe. Your job is to communicate the message in its fullness and let the message do its work. God's word is enough, and God's word can change people's heart. God's words formed the earth as we know it. Of course, it can change a man's heart. So don't be under any pressure to be an apologetic. I know there are people called to that, people who defend the gospel in that way. Don't feel under pressure to share the purity of your testimony. Be a witness for Christ, sharing that which he has done for you. And let the message of the gospel do its work, because that is where the power. For just as Apostle Paul said, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God that transforms the hearts of men. Well, paraphrasing. All right, you stay blessed.